Hey there. Today, we're diving into something you might not have heard of, but it's literally deciding the future of our oceans. It's called biometry. Think of it as this incredible statistical toolbox that helps scientists manage, well, everything, from the fish we eat to the survival of endangered whales. So yeah, let's jump right in.
So let me ask you something. How on earth do you count fish you can't even see? I mean, the ocean covers what, over 70% of our planet? It's just huge, deep, and full of life. So how do you actually know how many there are? How can you tell if a whole species is doing okay or if it's about to disappear when you can't possibly see all of them? Well, that's exactly the problem biometry is here to solve.
Okay, so why does all this counting matter so much? Well, it's because scientists are grappling with some really big questions about our oceans. And we're not talking about simple yes or no stuff here. We're talking about questions like, are we overfishing? I mean, really? Is this beautiful coral reef actually dying? Where do endangered whales even go? And the big one, how is climate change messing with all of this marine life? You can't just guess the answers to these. You need a solid, scientific way to measure what's going on.
And that, right there, is where biometry comes in. It's like the language that lets us translate all the beautiful, messy chaos of the ocean into numbers. Numbers we can actually understand and, more importantly, act on. It's kind of like our secret decoder ring for the ocean.
So what is this thing really? Well, at its heart, biometry, you'll also hear it called biostatistics, is just applying statistics to biology. Simple as that. But it's a whole process, you know? You go out, you collect the data, you crunch the numbers to find patterns, you figure out what those patterns actually mean, and then you share it so we can make smart decisions.
Really, the whole point is to make sense of all the variation out there. I mean, think about it. Life isn't a factory assembly line. Every single fish, every piece of coral, every whale, they're all a little different. Biometry is all about finding the real story, the signal, hiding inside all of that natural static.
And you know, this field isn't new. It's been growing for centuries. We're talking way back in the 1660s. A guy named John Ground started looking at death records in London and found these incredible patterns. That was like proto-biostatistics. Then, in 1901, it got official with guys like Galton and Pearson. The 1930s were a huge leap. R.A. Fisher brought genetics into the mix, which was a total game changer. And now, with the computers and AI we have, we can model entire ecosystems. It's stuff people from the past couldn't have even imagined.
Okay, so that's the history and the what. But how does this actually work out in the real world, in the ocean?
Well, for starters, this directly affects the food you eat. I'm talking about fish stock assessments. This is a huge part of marine biometry. Scientists build these complex models to figure out how many fish are out there, how fast they're reproducing, and, this is the big one, how many are being caught. All that data, that's what governments use to decide how much fishing is allowed. And let me tell you, if they get those numbers wrong, an entire fishery can just collapse. The stakes are super high.
It's also absolutely critical for protecting fragile places like coral reefs. A reef might look totally fine one year, and then suddenly it looks like it's dying. But that change is usually happening slowly, bit by bit. Biometry is the tool that lets scientists see those tiny changes over time. It helps them connect the dots. Oh, it's the rising water temperature, or it's pollution from that river. That tells them exactly where they need to step in and help, hopefully before it's too late. And of course, what about the big guys? Whales, dolphins, our most iconic sea creatures. How do you count whales that are migrating thousands of miles? It's not like you can just line them up. So, biostatisticians get really clever. They use techniques like mark recapture. Basically, they'll take pictures of a bunch of whales. Each one has unique markings, like a fingerprint, and then later, they see what percentage of the whales they spot are ones they've already marked. It's a smart way to estimate the whole population. And that's the kind of data you need to set up protected areas in just the right spots.
So here's the bottom line. This isn't just for scientists in a lab. It's not just theory. These numbers, these models, they become hard evidence. And that evidence is what's used to write actual laws, create marine sanctuaries, and guide huge international policies. This is science that has very real consequences.
Okay, so you might be thinking, hang on, isn't this all just statistics? And, well, you're kind of right, but it's more complicated than that. There's a really important difference that makes biostatistics its own special, tricky feel.
It's true that all biostatistics is, at its core, statistics.
But
And this is the key, not all statistics is biostatistics. You can't just take a standard statistical formula and slap it onto a living system. Biology is messy and complicated, and that changes everything.
Here's a good way to think about it. A regular statistician might track water quality. They're looking at pollutant levels, right? Important for sure, but the data is pretty straightforward. Now, a biostatistician looking at a fish population, they have to deal with the whole messy reality of life itself. When do these fish have babies? Where do they travel? What other animals are trying to eat them? What kind of home do they need to survive? It's statistics, but for a dynamic, living, breathing system.
And because these numbers lead to such massive decisions, there's a huge responsibility to get them right. Which brings us to our last section, and honestly, it might be the most important one, the ethics of all this.
So, what's the single biggest threat to all this important work? Simple. Bad ethics. People making up data or twisting the results to say what they want them to say. And in this field, that's not just cheating on a test. It could literally wipe out an entire ecosystem or destroy a whole town's fishing industry. The consequences are massive.
So how do we make sure we can trust the science? Well, there are basically 4 key steps. Number 1 is transparency. You have to share your data and methods so other people can check your work. Number 2, peer review. This is where other experts try to poke holes in your findings. It makes the science stronger. 3 is clear documentation. You have to explain what you did so well that someone else could come along and do the exact same thing. And number 4, which is interesting, is confidentiality. Sometimes you have to protect your data, like the exact location of a vulnerable species, to keep it safe from poachers or other threats.
And that really leaves us with one last big idea to chew on. Biometry lets us read the story of our oceans. A story told in numbers. It gives us guidance, it gives us warnings. But as data becomes more and more powerful in deciding the fate of our planet, we all have to ask a really important question. How do we make absolutely sure that the story the data tells is the true one?